So very warm welcome, and I stop talking and give the word to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Gilbert, and thank you the whole team for letting us participate in this Touching Cellulose lecture series. It's been great to following the lectures, and it's really it's an important subject, obviously, and it has been really nice to see the different approaches, and we're very honored to try to give our perspective on the subject. And as you said, we are online, on site, so that we'll see if we can gain something from that along the way. Hopefully it will work. But there will always be something on the shared screen to look at anyways. So if it fails entirely, we'll be all right. But yeah, I think to begin with, I'll just introduce our company just briefly. But the first picture here is a photo of the building we're actually sitting in. You might see the comparison between the two. And I'll just see if I can flip to the next. So just to give you an overview of the presentation, first we'll present like the studio approach and how we, at least how we want to practice architecture. Then we will introduce the House of Nature, which is like the primary building we're going to talk about. And in the end, we'll talk about how we also actually furnish the building and maybe some perspectives on projects from now on and how we want to approach following projects. Yeah. So we have like this term, this is Danish, at least the first two words, sund arkitektur, which directly translated is healthy architecture. I don't think it maybe necessarily gives the same feel in English, but I think it's a term that we use to describe our practice, and to elaborate it, you could say it's inspired by historic building culture and with sustainability as a premise of practicing architecture. And I think sund arkitektur, healthy architecture, comes from like another term in Danish that's called sund fornuft, common sense, and that's sort of key to our approach, to use common sense in the way we approach architecture. So I'll start somewhere else than timber and cellulose materials, because actually for us, it all started with rammed earth, and for the building industry as well. The photo at the left side is an old watchtower from the Han Dynasty in ancient China, which was actually made by rammed earth. This is such a basic material that has found great use all over the world since like the beginning of man, and it was actually the material we at first fell in love with and wanted to explore more. The second photo here, the one in the middle, is showing an old photo of I think it's a French explanation of the whole how to ram earth and how to use different tools. And we're very inspired by this process where the building was very closely connected to where the material came from, but also how it was processed. So we did like a big study trip where we searched for more modern examples of using rammed earth. For instance, a lot of projects by a man called Martin Rauch in Austria and Switzerland. You might be familiar with some of the projects. But that was sort of how it started. We did a lot of different testing. This was already like the last year of our education, and we did a thesis project about rammed earth as well. And we did a lot of testing. Afterwards, we also did an educational research at the School of Architecture in Aarhus, and we've done like smaller projects with it. And at one point, it was like we're almost turning into this production company that was meant to use the rammed earth to create these building elements. But at one point we looked at each other and said, no, we're not a production company, and that's not what we're meant to do. We want to practice architecture. So we knew that we had to sort of broaden our perspective a bit and not only work with rammed earth. We had to sort of see rammed earth like a symptom of how we wanted to work and the materials we wanted to use. So then we did a project. This is a pavilion. We did using the clay, but also the wooden structure, and it's all local. The rammed earth is from Aarhus, where the pavilion is erected, and it's with stone from the Aarhus Harbor Bay. So everything is really local, and the wood as well, as local as it gets, at least. And then after its use, it was just demolished, and the earth was just reconnected with its context as landfill. So this was sort of the start of, okay, how can this, as far as possible, be a premises of practice? So this is a lot of text, and I won't read it all, but we sort of did along the way, we sort of created manifests. We've done that a couple of times, but I think just to pinpoint some of the key elements of it, I would just read a bit of it. Our pre-industrial cultural heritage is rich in craftsmanship based on the understanding of basic and natural materials, which contain a number of inherent environmental and indoor climate enhancing qualities, traditions that have been perfected for several hundred years, and that's to say the least. With its work, ReVaerk wants to encourage and show examples of how looking back can inspire the development of present architecture, building and spaces where environmental considerations are premises, not an option. Yeah, so that was, and then we sort of, it has evolved into being like a series of bullet points for us to guide us in our work, as we call principles of practice. And I won't necessarily, again, read them all, but it's all about keeping a low carbon emission from the building as a whole process, in a life cycle process. But I think as very important is also to prioritize some solutions that not only performs well technically, but also has its own aesthetic value, and sort of that the whole building is gaining from it. And then obviously something about using materials that has a low processing, that it's natural materials, basic materials, something also to be acknowledged as you experience a building, both to understand the building, but also to make it possible to disassemble and use the elements of a building again. And then we have also got some key points about how we wanted to be connected to the building side and the process. That we want to be as close to a project as possible, and to acknowledge the value of listening and learning during design as well as on-site, and if needed, showing agility to make changes in dialogue with construction workers during the building process. Yeah, and then I think very important also to seek inspiration in traditional craftsmanship and constructive principles. But all in all, I think we're also using the material palette or pyramid as shown here, developed, I think Anna Baim presented it, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. And this is something we also use a lot in the communication with our clients in order to talk about materials in terms of their emission during a whole life cycle, and how we can from that sort of prioritize materials and how they're used. And this is just a brief introduction to where we work when we're not here. This is at left, this is the building we're in. We are at the Sydhavn in Aarhus, which is an old slaughterhouse area. And we are in a freezer room, if that's what it's called, where we got our studio, but we also got like a big wood workshop, because it's important for our practice, as I said before, to be very close to the projects and sometimes we also do furniture when the opportunity is there in a building project. And I think this combining working with hands and drawing and on computers, that's sort of a dynamic for us. So we started then broadening our horizon in terms of material, and we've actually done a lot of projects using timber construction. We worked together with a entrepreneur that sort of did a lot of projects, and we sometimes we only did sketches, and sometimes we did a whole project as well. But we tried different things, but it was all sort of within the same frame of what he, as an entrepreneur, wanted to work with. So therefore, I think it was also like a revelation for us when we got the chance to work with the House of Nature, which we'll talk about now. Because this was a client that was ready to do more than just the ordinary. And they really set a high standard for how to build, how they wanted the building to be, and its profile in terms of sustainability. So it fit really well with thoughts about how we wanted to practice as well. So the client, yes, is this folk high school, and the overall function of the building is teaching in nature and outdoor life. And that can mean a lot of different things. The initial process was that this is a photo of the overall folk high school, which is a really big building structure, and is done like it's a really strict architecture language. And to begin with, they were actually thinking about doing the building close to the rest of the folk high school building structure, but it got way too tied up in this very strict concrete structure. It was really hard to create something that exuded this nature and outdoor life. So that was the existing conditions, and I think that was what really set off the assignment, that right now they had a feeling like they were teaching something about being out in the nature and creating stuff. And obviously a lot of the time they would be outside, but in Denmark, as I think all of our countries here are, the weather is quite often not ideal for being outside. And sometimes one has to do it anyway in that kind of subject, but sometimes you'll be inside. And doing so, it was like bummer that it was just a classroom. How could they create something that sort of set a better framework for teaching this subject? And then that was sort of the brief, and then we started looking at the existing structure, because it might be a bit strict, but it has got its beautiful parts that we got a bit curious about. For instance, this is one of the main halls in the building. I believe you can see the cursor that I'm, yeah. And it has this volume that sticks out and sort of has a large weight in the top, and then it's more open at the bottom. That was sort of a motive that we thought, okay, it could be interesting to repeat something like that. Then we also have a clear structure, maybe especially at the photo at the right, you can see there is a clear concrete structure that is actually exposed on the outside. And that sort of visible structure, we thought, okay, let's see if we can, in other materials, maybe communicate some of the same structural themes. A thing that then came to our mind, as we used historic building practices as a toolbox, one of the things that came to our mind was the old Danish bullad. I don't know the English word for it, but you can. It's shown here in the photos. What it is? It's a type of wooden building that has been used different places in Denmark, and it dates back. I think the first one's all the way back from Viking Age, and it's basically having an exposed wooden structure and then having planks in between it that's actually slided in between the columns. And then it's sort of all connected without screws. actually, and that would be ideal. But it creates an interesting structure where wood is sort of there's not used anything but wood, and you can see the structure, and has a lot of we thought a lot of potentials. So we wanted to use that. We knew from quite early. Then regarding the context and sort of the landscape of the place, it's very characteristic with this big circular lawn, which they use. I think they mowed the lawn like all week and then again, and they use a lot of time on keeping this as neatly as possible. But then we have this edge between the lawn and the more dense and wild forest, and there's really a tension between the very neatly cut lawn and then the forest here. So we suggested the Folk High School, why don't we sort of gain something from that tension, because it's sort of one side is directly and visibly connected to the Folk High School's building structure, and the other part is stretching within this forest part that's more like exuding what the subject is all about. So this tension, this forest edge got to be like a key point. And these are just some initial sketches where we sort of I think started with the geometry of the lawn, and then sort of thought, okay, what if we then do some a building that stretches into the forest, and could we maybe do so by pushing the volumes back and forth, and then also enable the building to stretch within in between the trees of the forest. And I think right here we can see sort of a motive from the Folk High School's building. We wanted to from a distance sort of to communicate between this new building and the existing building. Then we quite often get at an early point we turn on to the structure and sort of research a bit about structures and how to do it. And I think one of the challenges obviously was that we knew that we wanted to make an exposed structure, timber structure, and we wanted to be inspired by this bullade. But obviously the bullade was created at a point of time where there wasn't any need for insulation. So this sort of totally ruins the concept of the bullade somehow. But we were curious as to how could we then maybe reinvent it. And there's a lot of timber constructions that's sort of filled with wood within the whole depth of the construction. We'd rather want to do like a double column construction where there will actually be no transmission of cold air from one side to the other, transported in material. We'll have like an open space where the granular insulation could be added. And that sort of started the thing. And we can also see here that at an early point, we got curious about using screw pile foundation as the building is, can I go back? No. As the building is sort of, there is a slope between the two parts here. We wanted to make the building able to hoover into the forest using screw piles. And also that's a brilliant way to save concrete, obviously. And then I think we'll just we'll make a try to then introduce some of the materials that are used within the building, and Mathias will try to see if that can work.
Yeah, I'll just grab the camera here and switch it around so you can see some of the materials. We started developing our...
So now we can switch screen correctly.
Yeah, exactly. You can try and switch the screens. I'll do. So here, can you mute that one? I'll unmute here. We started developing Sorry. Well, I think we're running. I hope you have a combination of the live video plus the shared screen with from the presentation on your screens, all of you. We started developing our material palette for the house and for the structure in general. And of course, it was this is a building made for outdoor life and for craftsmanship directly in the forest. So of course, wood, as you see on the table here, this is the main material. It is actually the material for all of the things we have made here. The basic structure is made from 150 by 150 millimeter Douglas. That's the general material. It's the load-bearing material in the house. We have here a cut-off from the interior cladding. That's Douglas fir as well. In this case, it is a Denison. It's normally made for flooring, but in this case, it's made for the wall structures all over the house. As you'll see later on in some of the technical drawings, we have a material here. It looks a bit like MDF, but it's a wood fiber board made without any kind of glue. It's a German product. We'll come back to that. We have insulation material here, wood fiber, both used as solid boards and used as blown-in fill for most of the volumes. If you look at the list, then you'll see as a ceiling material, we have used the Trolltect, the wood fiber mixed with a bit of concrete. In this case, a natural version where we've used the gray cement to get this kind of mixed texture. Our flooring material, I have it up here, you might see it a bit better. It's a offcuts end grain structure, only 18 millimeters thick, so it's perfectly made for heated floors. But at the same time, end grain is 3 times more durable and sturdy than if the same material and the same species of wood is used as planks. So for a building here where we have a lot of students coming in with dirty boots and doing a lot of tough work, we have a very sturdy floor. On the outside, we have a lot of terraces. You'll see that later. All of that is covered in Keboni, a Norwegian product, a heat-treated piece of wood, which has a long lifetime in the Danish climate. And then we have a single piece of the outdoor shingle material here. That's acacia wood. In this case, and for this building, it has been pre-treated, so it gains this gray silverish color way faster than it normally would. And then we have a few pieces from our special windows here. We'll come back to the windows in one of the later drawings, but we have ventilation windows here. We'll come back to that. Can you flip the screens or take the next slide? Yep. And we'll come back here. To go a little deeper into the building itself, we have a zoomed in sit plan here, side plan, where you clearly see how the building is positioned right at the tension, right at the edge between the neatly moved lawn and the dense forest in here. The Volkspark School already had a clearing out here in the trees where they had a small hut for bonfires. They had a shelter as well. So we placed the building here, and in the initial process, we did a full scan of the site to determine where all the trees were positioned, so we could fit in the building to save most of the trees. And that kind of influenced the plan as well. You see the lower plan, the lower floor here. If we go a bit into details, we arrive up here on the terraces on the broad walk. We have 120 meters broad walk all around the edge of the lawn up to the main school. We enter the building here in the hall. We have a stair for the first floor. Then we have the entrance room, which is a combination of passing through room to the terraces on the forest side down here. It's a workshop room, and it's the staircase. We have our main workshop room in here. It's about 45 square meters size. A lot of storage space for the tools used in the different subjects taught down here. We have a smaller workshop room in here, and another workshop room in the back where you can close the doors and do some dirty, some dusty woodwork. You can have a lot of goods stored in here. On the other side of the building, on the fourth of these 4 volumes, we have all the technical facilities. We have 2 bathrooms. We have another outside toilet, and we have a lot of depots for long-time storage. Then on the outside, on this facade, we have an outdoor kitchen. You can see that later as well. It is stored in behind some large gates which can flip up, so we can shut off and lock the kitchen and then open up when the students are down here. If we move on to the first floor, we have a top floor up here. It is a lounge room. We have a window to the forest, and we have a door out here, and then we have a roof terrace on top of one of these volumes. And then I have just taken one of the facades with me here today. We have the southern facade seen from the forest side to the building. We see all 4 of our volumes. And as you saw in the plan, each of these volumes are conical, so they fit the shape of this oval lawn. In the forest, they have the wide side of each of the 4 volumes. We have a lot of window area in the ground floor compared to the side, to the lawn, where we only have the entrance room as a glazed wall. And we have a round window at the top floor framing this special forest view we have up there. You'll see that in a few pictures in a moment. We realized when we searched the site down here before we started building that the forest down here is a lot of birch. Then we found one beech tree in the middle of the clearing down here, and we made sure that the round window fits that one special tree in the clearing when it's blooming in the spring. As well, in the facade here, you see the clear, visible structure, the framework, kind of framing the facades. And you'll see in the detailed drawings later that the structure is part of the structural setup. At the same time, you'll see the building hovering above the ground. The full building is set on screw piles, and we have short of 0.5 meter of free air underneath the building all around to make the proper ventilation. At the same time, that adapts the building from the level of the lawn and then the slope about 1.5 meters falling down into the forest area. We've collected a few pictures from the building process, so you get an idea of the build-up. In this series, you see the screw piles. At the beginning, the full building is set on 66 screw piles, about 3.5 meters long, set up in short of 2 days. That saved a lot of concrete, and it saved a lot of building time in the process. At the site down here, we have a very high groundwater level. So if we had to do concrete, it would have taken tons and tons of concrete to make a proper foundation. The screw piles here even out the levels on the site and makes the process so much easier. On top of those screw piles, we have a series of main beams. And on top of that, we have our main deck construction. As soon as the main deck was set up, we chose with the contractor to put a tilt all around the building site. That clearly improved the building process and made sure we could build the building without the risk of rain and snow during those 8 or 9 months as the building process took. Inside the tent, the carpenters started setting up the main ductless construction. And as you clearly see here, and in the next couple of pictures, the building is made in a bit strange way. We started the building and built it inside out. So we started out with the inside load-bearing solid wood construction. Then we added the ductless planks as a part of the construction as well, stabilizing construction. And then we built layer by layer on the outside. We put on the vapor barrier. We put on the outside facade, and then we had the insulation blown in, as you'll see in these next pictures. Here's an in-between process where we have the inside ductless construction, and we have the planks starting to go on some of the volumes. On the next picture here, you'll see the planks in one volume, and then we have our wooden fiber boards put outside on the planks. And in the first picture here, you kind of see the bit strange way of setting up this building. We had an almost finished building on the inside before we even had the roof put on. The building here shows the bathrooms and the technique, all the installations. But as you clearly see, all the interior facades are the finished ductless planks, all the finished facades. And we're still missing the full roof structure, and we're still missing the outside facade. That puts some demands to the carpenters to do that kind of rough and initial building process, but with a level of finish that would fit a proper interior carpentry. And then we have a series of pictures from the finished product. You will talk about that, Simeon? I'll just switch this.
Cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, go to the. Okay, yeah. So this just shows how the conic volumes stretches from the lawn into the forest, as we also saw in the site plan. And this is sort of an image showing how you approaches the building as you walk from the main buildings of the Folk High School and down to the House of Nature. As Mathias said, we had this large or long wooden deck describing the geometry of the oval lawn as well, and making a nice entrance arrival to the building. This is also because actually the lawn is very neat, but it's also easily filled with water when we have a lot of rain. It's sort of almost not entirely underwater, but it's not comfortable to walk in then. And then it was nice to have like a constructed wooden deck here, also to create a better connection between this satellite of a building and the main building of the Folk High School. And I think also here we can see that the different sizes and heights of volumes are also giving a more welcoming feel to the building. It sort of moderates the scale a bit. I think if we've done one large building volume, it would be way too big and wouldn't really fit into either the scheme or the area. This is a close-up photo of the facade where you can really see I think the oak exoskeleton frame and then the acacia shingles and how the different materials are sort of playing together. And also here actually I think a really beautiful play of light where the sun comes in through one volume and continues out on the facade next to it. And this is the room we showed in the beginning, and also the space we're in now. This is sort of the main workshop where they have these tables set up and where they can work and do if they're working on a canoe or just a smaller knife or something, this would be the place. And this is also the place where they have like the more regular teaching and so. And I think here, as Mathias briefly showed before, and we'll see afterwards as well, that we have this very dominant construction. And it means we have the construction on the inside. We can always see how it is, how it's doing. But it also, obviously, it gives this character to the building to be something more than just a sleek building. It gives this more rustic nature, and therefore sort of, I think, gets to be more a continuation of the forest than necessarily a contrast to the forest. And that was sort of the effect we wanted to gain as well. And then obviously this room has a very unspoiled connection out to the birch trees. And then we got, and I think even more than we had hoped, we get this these diagonal views, because we have these conical volumes, and when we sort of look through the building, we get these diagonal views from one opening to another. And when the light comes in, it really creates these special depths in the building. It's really interesting and works, as I said, even better than we had hoped. And just some more photos of, I think, especially the one on the right here, where you can see how the light just plays with the textures of the building and again creates different depths throughout the different spaces of the building. Also, I think in these photos you can see how we try to use fixtures, for instance, both like the light fixtures, but also the power and the switches. We didn't want it to be like regular switches. Obviously, it had to fit into the rusticness of the building. So we got through quite a process. In Denmark, at least, we haven't got any traditions of doing anything else than we have one company controlling doing all that electric parts, but I think it was nice to make it also with the visible connection down to the floor. And so this photo, I think, again shows that the different volumes gets different connections to the forest, also as the forest varies in its density and character. And here especially you also see like the two volumes divided by this portal that's in between the volumes. I think maybe Mathias will come back to that, but that was a thing too when doing these 4 volumes. We had a debate on should we then overlap the building so it gets the same. Is there still a connection? Okay. Yeah, we were debating if it should have like one wall connecting both volumes, or we should do a double wall in order to have 4 total volumes. And we did the last thing, and that created these portals in between the volumes, sort of transition zones, which then also, I think, beneficially, can we go back a few slides? I think also beneficially created these, you can almost see it here, like these interior spaces where we could, for one thing, we could have all our pipes and electric connections. We could have that, power connections, we could have that within this space, but we could also get some, cupboards and a sink one side of the room. And this is just a photo of the stairway. During the stairway, we had a lot of discussions as well as how should a stairway in this building looks, but it turned into be like this more sleek. Still has the rustic mesh, but even though a sleek stairway in steel, that sort of contrasts the warm and soft wood. And this is then on the upper floor where you see now this is before there were leaves on the tree, so it's hard to see the big tree, but it's sort of a different way of looking out in the forest. So again, it's a different room and a different connection to the forest. But this, as Mathias said, is more like a room where you relax and you read a book and maybe just sit and reflect a bit. Then on the outside, on the south part of the south facade, we see how this main workshop building part is stretching into the forest, and it's set on oak columns down to the screw pile foundation. And here again on the south facade, you see the round circular window and how it's sort of, you can almost see here approaching the big tree, and again the exoskeleton of oak and the acacia shingles, and I think also here beautifully how the overhang sort of overlaps between the different structures. Yeah.
Yep. Then we have a couple of technical drawings and sections to look into to get deeper understanding of the building, and I'll just zoom in a bit here so you can see the different setups. The building itself is, as previously said, put on screw piles. On top of the screw piles, we have a series of main beams, and then we have our deck construction with a lot of insulation, of course. And then multiple layers on top, which is built sufficiently strong to put this solid timber construction on top of. To make the building a bit more light on the outside, as well as you saw on the previous pictures, the facade out here is not the... sorry. That's a bit tricky. The structure down here has a few levels, not to be too thick on the outside and to make the building float a bit more on top of the side. In the section here, you'll see as well the double frame or the double column construction. We have the interior solid Douglas column here put on top of the deck. And when we have windows, we have a lot of free space from the column until we have the window, which is put in between the exterior oak column structure. If we move up to the insulated part of the wall on top of the window, you'll clearly see that the space between those two columns either makes space for free room on the interior, or make space for our wood fiber insulation. As well, when we come up here, you'll see that our Douglas planks are put on the backside of our oak columns to make for structure and to make for interior cladding. On the back of those planks, we have our vapor barrier to make the house airtight. Not to make it vapor tight, but to make it airtight. That's kind of the basic interior wall. That's wood and wood, and then this cardboard-based vapor barrier. Then there's a lot of free space, and on the outside we have an oak column. In between those oak columns, we have our wood fiber board put on rafters as some frames pre-made and put up in the process. And on top of that, the wood fiber board, we have our shingle construction. To make for vertical construction, we have both interior and exterior, a vertical board, a plank all around the building. That goes again at the top to connect the exterior and the interior construction. On the interior, we have a huge oak beam, Douglas beam, which supports the full roof. That's the load-bearing structure for the roof construction. And on the exterior, we have an oak beam connecting the exterior oak pillars or columns. The roof itself is these I-beams made of as less wood as possible on top of the Douglas construction. All of it, both the walls and the roof, is at the very end of the building process filled up with wood fiber blown in to fill all the gaps. And on the very top, we have a ventilated space, which is quite large in this case compared to what you normally do, but that makes space for our drainage put outside the facade. We'll come back to that. And the roof is clad with bitumen-based top-up. Oh. Then I guess I have the option here to move on. Yeah, so now it works. We have a longitudinal section as well, where you clearly see the 4 different volumes. You see the different heights. Our entrance room, where we have the staircase, and the first floor is the second one here. To make it as thin as possible, we have the deck here that's made of solid timber, clad underneath with the same roofing material or the same material as all of the rest of the building. That's Trolltect. And up top we have the same floor as down here, the cut-off end grain. At the same time, you'll clearly see how the 4 volumes are made as 4 separate volumes, as Simeon said before, which makes these quite large and wide dividing walls between the different volumes. That makes space for these portals where we lowered the ceiling height. So you move from one volume to the next and to the third in the row. We have the main workshop in here with a large skylight. You saw that in the sky view as well. And we can move on to the smaller different workshop rooms in the last volume out here. In the first volume, we have the toilets, the installation room, and the depot. And on the top of that, we have our roof terrace. With a wood decking on top. And then the wall is continued to make the frame around the terrace, creating the same type of top as the different other volumes. Then we'll try something where we have the detailed drawing on the screen here, and I'll bring the phone around the house to show you a few of the details live on the camera. So we'll just
we switch screen.
Switch screen, and I'll go outside to show you these different details.
Oh, Mathias, hvordan kom den tilbage igen? Sådan der.
Sorry, we are moving out here. You see the building is in use, and the sign is used. We'll come out here to have a closer look to the construction here. Sometimes
Probably a little bit waiting until it streams properly.
Yeah, I'll move a bit slower. And then if we have a closer look at the construction itself, we have the screw pile at the bottom that transfers to a 200 by 200 millimeter oak column. Instead of having those steel rods going all the way up to the building, we decided to put the screw piles all the way down out here in the facade, and then continue with a piece of wood. The oak comes up here where we have our deck construction. Then we have an in-between piece of solid timber here to make a proper space for the exterior 100 by 100 millimeter oak column. Folded all the way to connect the parts. Then the outside here is clad with oak planks at 2 different levels to make it a bit more sleek out here in the facade. And if we move around here, you'll see the oak column moving all the way up. That's a continuous column going all the way, supporting the exterior facade as an exoskeleton. In between those columns here, we have a frame of oak as well around all our windows. At the bottom, a piece of oak to let the water drain from the window down. And on the side, to cover the part of the window which might be a bit fragile, of course. A plank of oak as well, bolted in. All of it made for disassembly. So if we have to change the window in the future, if we have to change some of the parts out here, all of it is bolted, so we can take the things apart. We can take the planks off here, take the planks off at the top as well, take the window out and replace that. Then I would like you to take the next slide, Simeon. That's ductless construction on the interior. As you see out here, we have all of the construction bolted, so it's made for disassembly. That comes as well for the interior. All of the ductless construction here is bolted to be able to take it apart. I'll take one of the columns here. All the main columns are put in this kind of bracket at the bottom, bolted to the floor. And as you see here as well, where we have the windows, we have the free space as a result of our double column construction. We have the interior column and we have the exterior column in between the windows. Moving up, we have our vertical board moving all around to stabilize the construction. And moving around like here, we have the top beam as well. I'll move to a place where, let's see, it'll be more clear. We have the main beam continuing all around at the floor or at the ceiling, where we support the full roof structure, and everything is bolted. The next slide, then I will move upstairs to have a closer look at our round window. The window itself is special made. It's 180 centimeters in diameter, and it's made as a special order for this house. It's made from Douglas, as well as all the other windows. We'll come back to the other windows in the next slide. Here we decided that we would love to have a bench continuing all around this facade, but at the same time a window where you could kind of crawl in and sit inside the window frame to look out at this special tree right out here. So we had the window made as one piece. It's laminated Douglas in 6 frames, glued up, so it's 400 millimeters deep, going all the way from the glass X outside to the inside frame here. Then to fit the rest of the building, it has an exterior oak ring to cover the seam between the round window and the exterior facade. Yeah, can you take the next slide, Simeon, for me? That's outside, and this kind of overhang. We'll move to the roof terrace. And we'll have a closer look at the roof construction. When we decided to make all of it as a wood construction, we knew that we had to take care of water, of course. And we made a solution where the drainage of the water happens outside of the facade. At the same time, we all know that it makes sense to have as big as overhang as possible when you do a wood building. So we tried to make it sleek, but to protect the facades here. Can you take the next slide for me, Simeon? Oh, sorry, that happened a bit too quick. I would like to tell you about the rest of the windows before we talk about furnishing. So I'll just move down here again. The windows in this building are quite special. It's made and based on a concept called the Russian window, which dates back to the Winter Palace in Russia about 250 years ago. The concept is that on the exterior, I'm just, sorry, now you're flipping a bit around. On the exterior, you will have a regular two-layered thermoglass. And then on the interior, you'll have a single-sided piece of glass as well. If we come closer to the frame here. In here, you have a single piece of glass. And out there, you have a double-layered glass. That makes sense that when you have about 100 millimeters of free air in between these two pieces of glass, then at the bottom down here, we have a series of vents, and we have the same at the top up here. All of that makes a concept developed by a Danish company called Ventilationsvinduet. And the full concept both creates ventilation for the house and at the same time creates fresh but preheated air inlet to the house. So at the bottom we have an open valve letting in some fresh air. When the air comes into the space between the two pieces of glass, it is either heated from the sun outside or it is heated from the energy loss from the interior of the building. When heat is, or when air is heated, it raises up and the air kind of flows up in between those layer of glasses. When it comes to the top of the window, we have valves up here, and the preheated now air is automatically directed into the house. At the same time, we have another valve. So in the summer, when it's very warm, there's a bypass valve. All of it kind of passive, mechanically controlled by some very simple mechanics. But the very hot air in summer is let out again, so we're not overheating the building at the same time. Most of the windows in the house here are made with this ventilation system. All of that generates enough fresh and preheated air to combine with a heat pump in the installation part of the building. And then a heat pump is creating the warm water for our floor heating. At the same time, that is the ventilation system for the house. So we do not have an extra and dedicated ventilation system. All of the air comes in by the windows and is sucked out in a few special places in the house to make the warm water in the heat pump. Then I'll move back here and here. And we can have a look at our furnishing for the house. So you can switch back to the slideshow.
All right. So yeah, here I think in the end we would like to talk a bit about doing the furnishing for the building as well, because as I think I said in the beginning, we really like to prioritize being as much a part of a building project as possible. And we were lucky to get the assignment of doing the furnishing for the building as well. And I think this has something to do with the fact that they needed some furniture that wasn't just something that they could buy in any regular store. They wanted some furniture that both had sort of the elegance to match the elegant part of the building, but also the roughness in order to be something that you can use in a wood workshop, as this is as well. And so we got the opportunity to design and manufacture actually all the furniture for the building. So the first thing is the tables that are in this room. it's work tables, so it's really stable tables in solid. The surface is pitch pine, and the construction of the table is in ash wood, and it's really large dimensions. But at the same time, we sort of created a more multiple layered construction that makes it more elegant, I think. And it's also you could say foldable. You're able to take off the the main surface of the table and then fold the construction of the table and store it here in the cupboards in the back of the room. And then also creating these 6 legs instead of 4 makes it both able to work on the corner of the table, which is quite often not a possibility, because the legs will go to the corner of the tabletop normally. But here, this is actually a good place to sort of work with a different wood pieces, and it also gives us some stability. And then we did the stools as well, and obviously you would have to be able to stack the stools as there's going to be 50 in here. But at the same time, again, how could we create something very solid, but yet elegant? So we work with that. And this is in both the seat and the construction is in ash wood. We did some armchairs as well. And I think this was also a place to, again, how to use something, to make something that is solid enough to be used by the pupils out here, and sort of to match the rusticness of the building, but at the same time to be comfortable and to have these varied surfaces that welcomes you when sort of touching it with your hands or leaning against it. And then the fabric we used for the pillows for the armchair is hemp fabric. So we tried to also have the you might see the bio materials, the natural materials to be a part of the furniture project as well. And we even did light bollards for the pathway down here. So yeah, we really got to do everything out here. That's really nice. And we did these to sort of mimic the construction, oak construction on the outside of the house. So a continuation all the way up from the folk high school and down here to the building. So then just a last here, I'd like to say something about our sort of, when we reflect upon this project, obviously this has been a great pleasure to do a building like this, but it has come with a lot of challenges as well, and we really learned a lot. And we are really looking forward to doing the next projects where we can sort of rationalize some of the different approaches, but definitely also bring some of the same ideas and references to the next ones. And I think just a brief look into what we're working with now. We're working with a townhouse area in Nyborg, and this is I think quite one-to-one, sort of creating the same construction, but then rethinking the whole, you might say, what is done at what point, and how can we sort of make that more smooth. But also at the other end, maybe go even further and say, could we then introduce this time, again inspired by the Bull, a more traditional approach to the joinery? Could we maybe, I think, as far as possible, get rid of the metal screws? And this also comes because we have a client here that really loves wood, over-dimensioned wood, but hates metal, hates glue. Nothing can be glued in this building. So it's, I think it fits the more idealistic approach that we are so fond of. And another project we're doing, which is sort of the same program, but for another school, It's doing like, an educational building as well, teaching nature and outdoor life actually. And we'll do like a more regular structure, but then sort of to perfect the whole construction system and maybe focus even more about a load-bearing exoskeleton. And maybe I think using cork as insulation, but yeah. Then at last, I don't know if we got time for it, but we were thinking about just showing the video. It will only take a few minutes. Is that okay, Gilbert? And then I think we're done.
Just switch over here.
Friluftsbygningen, den er placeret på kanten mellem åben plæne og tæt skov. Bygningens volumener, de beskriver plænens geometri, og samtidig på den anden side, så strækker de sig ind imellem skovens træer. Med den her bygning, der har det i høj grad været ønsket at afsløre, man kan sige, det smukke i det naturlige og det basale. Og det har været vigtigt at skabe en stærk sammenhæng mellem inde og ude, at bygningen ikke adskiller sig fra naturens rum, men mere det, at brugen af træ og den stemning, der skabes herinde, gør, at bygningen mere bliver en forlængelse af skovens rum, og er med til på den måde også virkelig at underbygge den aktivitet, der skal være her, den undervisning i friluftsliv, som skal udspille sig her i bygningen. For os at se, så er det at skabe læringsmiljøer, det er en invitation, men det er virkelig også en forpligtelse til at bidrage med noget aktivt. Det er at udfordre og inspirere gennem rum, der har en særlig karakter og en særlig identitet, der passer til det bygningen skal bruges til. Brugen af træ begrænser sig ikke kun til bygningens overflader, men det er også brugt til konstruktion i bygningen og som isoleringsmateriale. Sammen med brugen af jordskruer, som er fundament, og opvarmning og ventilation gennem ventilationsvinduet, der er det med til at sikre bygningens minimale miljøaftryk. Til det, der har højskolen i høj grad haft mod til at dedikere bygningen til mere end bare det at svare på de åbenlyse behov.